Cool. All right. So thanks again for joining us. This is really exciting. I guess let's start with the obvious first question is about your book and, why this statement that it's making is so important to you about how women don't owe you pretty.
Okay, so I started writing the book about a year and a half ago. Women Don't Owe You Pretty. It was inspired by the entry quote that I put in my introduction by Erin McKean, and it says, "Prettiness is not the rent you pay to exist in the world as a woman." And I saw this quote floating around like Tumblr. I think she wrote it in like 2012 or something. And I saw it floating around the internet for so long, and it always made me feel really uncomfortable. And when you see something that's really uncomfortable and you just kind of like ignore it, and you actually oh, I just don't get it, like I don't. And I was a bit like that with feminist discussion on the internet about abusive relationships. I ignored it, right? And then when you realize that you're ignoring it because it applies to you, that's what that quote meant for me. I realized that I'd been performing femininity and prettiness and niceness and shrinking myself, making myself palatable around men to get them to like me. Because as a woman, there's nothing better than feeling desired. Or at least that's how we're socialized to feel, right? Not all women will feel that way. There's one chapter on pretty privilege. The book isn't about pretty privilege, but the overarching message of the book is to encourage women and non-binary people, but particularly people who have a feminine gender expression, I guess, and people who are attracted to men, how much of your character, how much of who you are, how much of how you behave in the world is actually a product of being socialized to believe that your worth is tied up in making men feel great about their masculinity. And I am such an outspoken person, and I realized that there were times where I would dampen down my feminism for the temporary validation that I could get this man to like me. And I reflected with that quote on how much of my life was performing for men. And I think I keep saying it on my Instagram and interviews that it's a book I wish I could have whacked over my fucking head when I was a child, because there's so many important lessons in there, particularly the lessons about internalized misogyny, rape culture, consent, all of this kind of stuff. This is my language now. I live by this stuff. I live by accountability. I live by practicing consent, and I live by not expecting any less than that from other people. And I didn't know what these words meant. And once I learned this language, and once I learned about emotional abuse, I couldn't ignore that my whole life had been, it's like you view your life through an entirely different lens. And I wanted other women to come to the same realization. It's very uncomfortable. That's why I said on the back of the book, like, warning, this book contains very uncomfortable truths, because it does. And I think for a lot of people who maybe join in these kinds of discussions on the internet, maybe some of these concepts won't be new to them, which is amazing. Maybe they are very well read on consent and boundaries and all this kind of stuff. But for a lot of women, it takes these traumatic experiences for us to even learn the word boundaries and consent. It's taken me the most traumatic experiences happening in my life for me to then get therapy and get help and learn about boundaries in the first place. And I don't want women to have to learn how to say no through reading 5 books and going to therapy for years, because that's what it was like for me. I was a doormat to everybody in my life, and I used to envy women. I would call women who said what they wanted, asserted themselves, said no, I would call them a bitch. And it was because she reminded me that I couldn't say no to people in my life, and that I was a doormat to people. And I want to kind of flip that on its head for women. I want women to look at each other and say, am I calling her this name because she is a horrible person, or is it because she makes me feel insecure about myself? Is she mirroring these qualities that I lack back to me? And another quote in my book is, maybe I'm too much, or maybe my abundance reminds you that you're lacking. And I think it's an amazing perspective to have when you can hold people accountable for their actions, but you can also interrogate whether it's actually about something that you're feeling insecure by.
Wow, so much good stuff there. I guess for me, my question is, so what was the catalyst in you kind of really starting to get into feminism and going from, so someone who
Didn't know.
was envious of these really great women. I mean, I feel that way all the time. I'm always,
Oh
do
yeah, same.
you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, how did you like go from wanting to be that kind of person to being that kind of person? I think that's a question a lot of people have.
I love the word catalyst. I use that a lot. I think my catalyst for growth is always discomfort. If I'm uncomfortable, sometimes you have to be so uncomfortable to just like combust in this change for yourself. You have to be so uncomfortable with a situation to look at it and go, this isn't working for me. I deserve better. And I've had two very big moments in my life that inspired change in that way. The first was in high school. I was in this clique, this girls' clique in high school for the first few years. My school was wild. It was an all-girls school, first of all, and it was like eat or be eaten. And people would throw food at each other. People would chuck bags of flour off the doors. It was girls attacking each other, and there was a hierarchy. And I was in this clique, and it felt, now when I look back on it, the nature of cliques in high school, or at least the one I was in, was almost like a cult. You don't feel like you can leave. There's a head person in the cult, and you have to do everything you can to serve her needs, which is the purpose of a cult, right? And once you are out of the cult, people try and recruit you back in, or they will guilt you to coming back in, and you have to go. And then that's when I experienced bullying, right? So I was in this group. It was horrible. I would belittle other women. I would shame other women. Other women would shame me. It was like this recycling of pain. And I remember, that's how I would describe it. It was like a recycling of pain on each other. And you're just not supposed to question it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I did question it. And I was about 14 years old. And basically, I was in the friendship group, and I was starting to, classes were changing. We weren't close friends anymore, whatever. And then I had an eating disorder, and I confided in a friend about it. And that was used as a piece of gossip in the group that she wasn't in, to get in the group, right? So she used this thing about me as gossip. And then all of a sudden it was going around school that I had an eating disorder. And it was like, no one was allowed to, in the group, you weren't allowed to interact with me, because I was the one who was now ousted. So I was basically ousted from this clique when I was about 14. And I chose not to grovel back. Usually you would be like literally on your knees crying to get back into this group of girls. And I didn't do it. I stayed out. And I think it was sitting in that period of just being on my own, going to school every day and being not alone. I had a few friends in classes and stuff, but going and seeing them and knowing that they were shouting names at me, making noises, and eating disorder related noises, and all of this stuff that was like, it was torment for the next few years for me. But I had a great community of friends outside of school. I buried myself in books. I read a lot of self-help books. And I learned a lot about internalized misogyny, sexism, and insecurity projection during my bullying. And it helped me to empathize with them, for it to not hurt me and harm me. So I learned why they were doing this. I learned that this girl, that the head girl in this group, was actually just very insecure, and she got power from doing this, with this power manipulation thing that she had going on. And I think understanding that I wasn't a freak, for having an eating disorder, although that is in itself a very, very an issue that needs to be discussed, but for another time. I wasn't a freak. I needed help. I needed someone to help me, and instead I was bullied for it. And there were people who did care, but they weren't allowed to show it because of the girl. So anyway, it was a very, high school is like survival mode, right? It's like peak survival mode. Everyone's trying to da. So I made friends outside of school. And I think that was the moment where I was like, do you know what? I deserve better than this. I didn't like the person I was becoming in this group, to tear down other women just to keep my place in this clique. I didn't like it. And I think that was one of those moments. One of my catalysts for growth was separating from the group and reading loads of books and understanding human beings. I love human beings. I love understanding people. I love understanding myself, and I love making mistakes because I view them as opportunities for growth. And I think that was one of my main catalysts. My second enormous catalyst, was breaking up with my ex-boyfriend a couple of years ago. And I haven't shut up about it on the internet since, because in my head, I knew everything. I had everything under control. I couldn't have been in an abusive relationship because I'm so book smart and I know all of this stuff about. I could never be with an abusive man, but I was, and it was horrific. I was in the most abusive relationship and I was making excuses for his behavior. And it was just a repetition of that high school dynamic, but in an abusive relationship where I'd been gaslighted and manipulated into serving someone else's needs and making excuses for them. And also, I didn't question it because of the normalization of abuse in our society. You think of abusive relationship, you think of a man in a wife beater vest, like literally beating to death his wife and her being like shrill all the time and being so vulnerable. That absolutely, that does happen. But that is not the only type of abuse. And it's a bit like the rape myth that we have, that, you know, women are supposed to cover themselves up and look out for the monsters lurking in the alleyways. Oh no, 90% of all convicted rapes are by someone the victim already knew, meaning that nice guys do in fact rape. So it's just like the thing with abuse is that it is so normalized. We see it in love songs, in movies and all this kind of stuff. We're projected this image that you're supposed to stick by your man and stick by his side no matter what he's going through, and that is a determination of your worth as a woman in this world, how much shit you can put up with. And so that was my second catalyst for growth. It was an awful relationship, but he called me a bitch one day, and I was like, it just burst the bubble for me. And I don't know what it was about that word, but what I've kind of concluded from it was I said no to him for the first time, and then he called me a bitch, and that was what burst my bubble. I realized, holy shit, if someone in my life can call me a bitch, I've got, it was like I woke up to this history of, oh my God, I'm repeating this thing of making excuses for an abusive person again. And then I dumped him, and now I won't shut up about it on the internet, because I want, oh my God, if my work can, and it has, stopped women from going on dates and noticing these behaviors of people manipulating you before you get in the manipulation fog, like I've done my job, you know. And I think that's one part of my work. I have so much that I want to talk about, but that is one very big part of my work and one of the catalysts for my growth.
Yeah, wow. So can we talk a little bit about internalized misogyny? Because I feel like that, even like I pride myself for being like a feminist. I pride myself like, reading the books and knowing what's going on. But even still, like I still catch myself, having like these thoughts that are very much like shaped by internal misogyny, like jealousy, all of this stuff. And I think that that's kind of one of like the hardest like concepts to really like get your head around when you're like learning about this kind of stuff. Can you talk about your perspective on that a little bit more?
I talk all about it. I love talking about it. It was I think that was definitely my entry point to feminism. And then after that, I learned the words sexual harassment, sexual assault, and I realized it happened to me so many times and my friends, but we completely normalized it. And then that was my push over the edge to just shout on the internet when I was like 17 with my illustrations. But internalized misogyny was my entry point into understanding this girl hate, right? It's girl hate, there's no other word for it. And absolutely, I mean, I've spent 20 odd years internally hating women. That's what patriarchy does to you. So even though I've woken up to these concepts now, or when I was 14, that's still a lifetime of brainwashing in my subconscious mind that is telling me other women are my enemies, they're sluts, they're frigid, they are too much, they are too expressive, they are too this, that. And I realized most of the stuff that I hated in other women was stuff that I myself wanted to act on. So women are taught that like we can't desire things because to desire something makes us greedy. We're allowed to eat food, but not too much, that makes us greedy. We're allowed to have sex, for marriage with our boyfriends, but we can't have too much because that makes us greedy. And anything that's linked to desire for women is shamed. You only need to look at religion and some religious cultures that perpetuate this very patriarchal narrative where it's like the root of this. And again, not to make a sweeping statement about religion, but there are some religious practices that do enforce incredibly disgusting patriarchal narratives.
For sure.
And I think that I shamed women who were acting on their desire. I
Mhm.
shamed women who I saw being them fucking selves, saying no, having lots of sex. I'm bisexual, so I hated bisexual women because I was like, what the fuck are they doing? Like, thinking they can shag everyone or like anyone that they want, regardless of their gender, because that's what I wanted to do. And I just wasn't allowing myself to do it. I wasn't allowing myself to act on my desire. So I
Mhm.
would just point at them instead of questioning whether it was because I felt insecure. And like in the book, I speak about ways to flip this on its head. So if you see a woman wearing an outfit and you feel like you want to comment, like, what the fuck is she wearing? Flip it around in your head. Say, wow, in spite of what people might judge of this outfit, she's doing it anyway. That's iconic. That is so
Mhm.
empowering. I'm going to take some inspiration from from her courage and her confidence. And it's just flipping it on its head and like rewiring your brain to stop viewing women as these objects of envy and turning them into human beings who make mistakes. And you see this in cancel culture, even where men who have sexually assaulted women are still
Mhm.
thriving their fucking asses off. But
Yeah.
women who wrote a bad tweet in 2010 are cancelled because we hate women, right? So
Mhm.
it shows up in all aspects of our lives. And absolutely, I'm guilty of that so much. But it's about flipping it so that you don't cause the harm. You can have the thoughts are going to come. You can't stop your thoughts. Don't pretend you don't have those thoughts about women,
Mhm.
but stop causing that harm, stop
Yeah.
projecting it, and you view women as mirrors. So what you see, reflect it back and ask yourself if it might be about yourself.
Absolutely. And, recognizing those thoughts before they get into that harmful place.
There you go.
Um, so I really want to talk about something that you wrote in your book. Performing femininity isn't always a choice. It's often an act of survival. Can you expand on this idea? Because I mean, this is something that I really have never really heard before. So I loved it. I loved what you have to say about it. But I think for everybody who hasn't, really kind of heard of this idea before, can you
Okay.
just expand a little more on it?
Yeah. So particularly for marginalized women,
Mm-hmm.
and again, I can't speak for them, but they are held to a higher standard of prettiness than someone like me is. I can show up in the world and I will still be treated as less than when I don't perform prettiness. And when I say perform prettiness, I mean shaving my body hair, wearing makeup, doing my hair, performing femininity to fit into this role as a woman so that men in the world treat me with more respect. They listen to me, I get more opportunities when I perform prettiness as opposed to when I don't. All of these rituals that women do, marginalized women are expected to do them even more so than someone like me is, because I have a lot of pretty privilege already, being slim, white, cisgender, and able-bodied. So a fat black trans woman will be expected by society to perform all of these rituals, even more so to reach the same respect I am, let alone the same respect as a man. And it's very important to make that distinction. So femininity as a method of survival, women wake up and we make the decision of, do I mute my authentic self, or do I go out and perform these rituals to receive better treatment? Either way, it's a cost, because you're paying for the makeup, you're paying for the razors, the energy, the time, the labor that goes into being a woman.
Mm-hmm.
But also, you're probably going to be treated better in the workplace and on your dates. People aren't going to make weird remarks about your body hair. People are going to be nicer to you. People are going to be kinder. People will probably smile at you on the street when you look pretty, which is always creepy when it's from men. But you know what I'm saying? People will be nicer to you when you reflect back to them the ideas that they have of women. Or you be your authentic self however you want to show up in the world, but you pay in the cost of the unsolicited remarks, potential job opportunity loss because you're not performing prettiness, and people not being nice to you because you're the unruly woman with leg hair. So you pay either way. And I think every day, subconsciously or consciously, women make the decision of how they're going to pay. How am I going to show up today? And usually people will pay with the prettiness, with the shaving the legs, with the wearing the makeup, and we do it as routine, and we think that it's we don't question it, right? And I never questioned it in my whole life. And then I saw all these discussions about desirability politics on the internet, and I was like, wow, so beauty is political. And The Beauty Myth is one of the best books I've ever read in my life. And it basically shapes beauty under capitalism and patriarchy, because beauty is political. And I think whether that's natural beauty under racist, fatphobic, transphobic beauty standards, which someone like me benefits a lot from, or applied prettiness, which is the rituals, the beauty rituals that we do. And I think it's really interesting to look at prettiness in that way, that yes, everybody has an intrinsic beauty, their energy, who they are as a person. Are they compassionate? Are they kind? But under capitalism, we all have an individual worth that is applied to us and our bodies. But not to mention that even though prettiness is a privilege, it's also the thing that leads to traumatic experiences and more sexual harassment, more sexual assault. It will be the thing used against you if you look pretty in a courtroom to say you deserved your rape. So it's all of this. There's literally no way to win. So this is the conversation goes out like this, because you go this, oh right, so prettiness was this bullshit metric that men created so women could distract themselves and focus on their desirability, instead of waking up to the fact that they're showing up to work. Are they even being paid enough as their male counterparts? They're not even thinking about the gender pay gap, because they're too busy thinking about what they look like while they're working rather than the quality of their work. It's all a distraction.
So for someone who maybe is a little bit younger, like 18, 19, really kind of first going to university, I mean, I still have this, question every time I leave the house is like, okay, how much do I really want to get dressed up? I really want to wear this outfit, but I feel like I can't. Like, making that choice can feel like so overwhelming between, wearing what you want to wear, not wearing what you want to wear because, you're afraid of an assault or harassment. Do you have like any advice for someone just confronting these types of choices and decisions who might feel like really overwhelmed?
No, I don't, because you have to lead with your desire. I'm not going to tell someone, this is the thing. Rape culture exists, and as much as I don't want it to, there are frameworks in this world where you have to prioritize your safety in some instances. I'm just going to tell women to lead with their desire and lead with what they believe is right. I can't tell you what to do with your life or what to wear, but I can encourage you to interrogate your thoughts and whether what is that voice that's telling you not to do something? Is it your gut, or is it something your mum said to you when you were younger about you shouldn't go out dressed like that? So it's you've got to I would just encourage women to try and listen to their internal voice. Do they want to wear this outfit? It's tricky because there is a harm reduction element of covering up in public, and if that's what you want to do because it reduces your anxiety about going on the street and seeing men, then you do that. I'm not it's like, I think it's a woman's choice, and I'm not going to tell you what to do.
Yeah, that's actually a really good answer. I mean, again, I feel like your book and the work that you do is like this really like great unlearning of all of this like bullshit that women have been taught forever amidst this only the past couple months, this wider great unlearning. And so again, I feel like a lot of people right now are just kind of awakening to these new concepts and these new ideas and are kind of feeling like, well, what does this look like for me, like on a day-to-day basis? And like, do you have any kind of advice for someone like just kind of getting into this, new headspace?
Sexual awareness. I'm not like the expert on this stuff, but from I'll tell you my experience with it.
Of course, yeah.
Is making mistakes, making so many fucking mistakes, and then learning to be corrected. That's what you got to do. You got to learn to be corrected by people. And also, something I learned along the journey of this as well is not to cancel people for stuff you recently stopped doing yourself. I remember when I first started learning about white privilege a few years ago, I remember I would learn that a certain word had racial undertones. And then I heard one of my family members using it, and I was just like, you can't use that anymore. You're like, and in my head I was like, right, they're a bad person. That's not good. That just made me feel better about my guilt for previously using that word. I didn't do anything there. This person is actually probably just going to use it again because I looked like some person who was calling them a racist. And you should never police the way someone communicates their anger if they are part of that marginalized group. But as someone who is not a person of color, I'm white, I have the privilege of being able to go, yeah, actually, I used to use that word as well. But actually it has racial undertones because of the history of that word. So maybe just consider not using it because it's really problematic and it contributes to systemic racism, right? That's all. I have the privilege of being able to educate people in that way in my family because they will listen to me because I'm white. And it's not my fight. It's not my oppression. So I have the privilege to not get angry, which is a very righteous anger that marginalized people have. But I think it's being able to correct people and not get on this self-righteous high horse about something you learned 2 fucking weeks ago. So I'd say that is definitely something I learned, a big mistake I made along the way. Yeah, I guess the only thing I can tell you is my mistakes, right? So many times I would speak for marginalized groups instead of uplifting their voices and their work that they have made, because I was so passionate about all the stuff I was learning. And I'm an artist, so I was making artwork about cultural appropriation. And someone said to me, Floss, this artwork is great, but you shouldn't be making it. You should be sharing the work of people of color, talking about their own experiences. My ego couldn't take it. I was like, but I'm doing a good thing, blah, 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 blah. And then I realized a week later, yeah, she's right, fuck. It's this need for white people to like center ourselves in everything and every discussion, and I think it's learning to amplify people's voices instead of speaking for people. But absolutely, in your family dynamics, you know, you can't like ring up a black person and be like, hey, can you tell that's your job, but I'm talking about we should not be profiting from this work or making work or speaking for people. And in terms of coming to terms with your own oppression, it's so uncomfortable. You're going to feel sick. You're going to look back at all your old experiences with men, and you're going to look back at them thinking that wasn't right. Maybe it was sexual assault. You're going to look back on your favorite films and how they shaped you, and you're going to be like, this language is disgusting. You're going to look back at your old toxic behaviors, and look at times where you have been mean to women, or you've teared down other women because you felt shit about yourself. It's going to be so uncomfortable. The intro chapter to my book is feminism is going to ruin your life in the best way. Because it's true, it is going to ruin your life. It's going to flip it the fuck upside down. But that's the choice you make to see the truth of what you're enabling and what other people are enabling in you. What have people been treating you like, and they've been getting away with because of social norms. And going to be hell, but it's going to be great as well.
Yeah. You'll emerge like a butterfly.
Yes.
So in your book, you talk a lot about some pretty difficult subjects. Was it kind of emotionally draining for you to get it all down on paper? Yeah.
I cried in meetings sometimes. I think it's because this is some of the chapters on there are drawn like directly from uncomfortable lived experience. Some of them I've healed, you know, so it wasn't hard for me to talk about internalized misogyny, because it's something I actively work on in my life. I've confronted that part of myself. But there are absolutely chapters on sexual assault and rape culture was so uncomfortable to talk about, because those are very fresh wounds that I have. And I don't think anyone owes their experiences to anyone. That's something also that I want to teach women in particular. I was on a podcast yesterday, and the host asked me, she said, so you talk a lot about relationship abuse. She was like, could you tell us what it's like to be in an abusive relationship? Could you tell us like what happened to you? And I said, no, I'm not going to. I'm not going to lay out my trauma on a silver platter for people to dissect and know all this unhealed stuff about me. And she totally respected it. She totally understood it. But I think that's something I'd like to, you know, I didn't go into my experiences in this book, or rather, you know, the really horrible unhealed ones. I dropped a few anecdotes in there, like funny ones or ones that were uncomfortable. I dropped a few in there, but I don't think I owe it to people to talk about the abuse I've endured, because then people will use that as some kind of gossip or some kind of, you know, and I think I'm allowed to talk about my lessons from my experiences, as opposed to the experiences themselves. And that's what I kind of did with those chapters, to make it not feel like I was exposing my wounds to the world. I'm not ready to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, from my own limited experience in terms of sexual assault and starting to talk about it publicly, it's a hard thing to balance in terms of making sure that you're protecting yourself, but also, you know, being able to speak about the lessons that you've learned and from that and kind of the parts that you are comfortable saying, that's also very empowering.
Yeah.
At the same time, I have noticed this, that what I get a lot of questions, and I'm sure you do too, from women who aren't talking publicly about their assault, but they feel like because there's this new thing where women are starting to talk about it publicly, they feel like they're not if they can't do that too for whatever reason, then they're not also empowered.
There's so many things. There are so many secrets that women keep for men, that we keep for men, and it is exhausting. There's this woman on Instagram called Clementine Ford, and she wrote this post called "Not Your Secret Keeper," and I remember seeing that, and it really empowered me and made me feel uncomfortable at the same time, which is always great. To realize that my body has been a host for the secret and abuse of men my whole life. And I think when you realize that you are protecting your abuse, even if you tell a friend, you're not ruining their reputation, you're giving them one they deserve. And that for me was so empowering to realize that this is your truth. No one gets to determine your truth and your lived experiences with sexual assault, with abuse, whatever it is. And you have to stay in that reality, no matter the shit you hear from people, no matter the reactions you hear from people. You have to stay grounded in that. And sometimes that requires journaling, that requires writing it down so you know that it happened to you. That's what I did multiple times. And it's, I think the world gaslights women to believing that it was their fault, so that they never even recognize that it was sexual assault or rape. Because like I said about the rape myth, it has to be shoved down an alley and you did all the things. You screamed, you pushed him off, you did. And like I said, no, 90% of the time it happens with your fucking boyfriend. So it doesn't surprise me that there is still this culture of silence surrounding victims and their experiences. And if you don't speak up about it, you are not a bad victim. You are not a liar for not talking about your experience. It takes so long to even recognize it for what it is. For you to then also speak up about it, that's so fucking brave. Anyone who tells someone about their assault, anyone who goes to an institution, to their employer, to the police, anyone who does that is so fucking brave. Because like I said in my book, one of the first people I told after an incident was, yeah, but don't report it because you might ruin his career. And my message to anyone is fuck his career, because he should have thought about that.
I loved this quote. Flaws aren't really there. Flaws are man-made. That's like, I love it.
Yes, I mean man-made. Like not just like man-made, like man-made. Yeah, well, I spoke about the whole how Gillette, they made razors for women in the early 1900s because women didn't shave our bodies, right? And then they made female razors to fill a gap in the market, right? They saw shit, like we could get women to shave, and then they planted these seeds of insecurity with ad campaigns, which are obviously so manipulative, put them in magazines, and created this new version of women that was like hairless angels. And then all of a sudden that's the new beauty standard that everyone wanted to be. And then they made a fuckload of money from selling razors, and then made them pink, and then charged more for them because they're pink. And that's the pink tax that, it's a joke, pink tax, but it's true. Like anything that's pink is like costs more. So it's this thing that, we spend so much money trying to fit this accepted vision of woman. And we never question if it's even in line with our own desires. Do I even want to shave my own body, or am I just paying this money for razors because this is normal? No, it's not normal. So many things aren't normal. They've just been normalized, and there's a massive difference. So yeah, that quote, flaws are man-made. Like they are man-made. And even the women that we see in the magazines, who we are trying to aspire to this perceived flawlessness, they don't even look like that themselves because they've been airbrushed, they've been modified. And like I said in my book, Black women's features will even be like dramatically reduced to look more Eurocentric, to perpetuate the idea that whiteness equates beauty. So there are so many things that we aspire to look like and be that don't even exist themselves. And I think it's a lot like social media as well. I spoke about this in my book, in that chapter about social media, that a lot of us, we live very curated lives on social media, right? Which is fine. Like you don't owe people your sad days or your bad. You don't owe people that. But it's interesting now that we curate this version of it. Some people auto-tune their bodies and do this kind of stuff. And I was thinking, how long is it going to be before that is the version of our lives that we feel shit about not even being able to live up to, let alone society's beauty standards, which are way up here? We've now got our own curated version that we feel like You know, the phrase catfish, like so many of my friends are worried about, am I a catfish? And it's like, we can't even think about living up to this standard we set of ourselves on social media. Mm-hmm. And then we have this, it's just so many layers that we're now living up to. And I just want people to question it, to question how they're engaging with social media, how they're engaging with imagery of women. And yeah, The Beauty Myth is a great book to unpack that. So good.
Okay, cool. And then, so one question I always ask people, just because it's very much why I started Restless, and I'm still wondering about how to even feel this way in the first place. Is there anything that makes you feel particularly powerful? Anything that you do in your life that just makes you feel like you're in control?
Clothes. Mm-hmm. Clothes and fashion. I love it. I love my gender expression is changing all the time, and it's just getting back to who I was before I wore bodycon dresses and push-up bras and like stiletto heels at like to house parties when I was like 14. So it's like I'm constantly refining my style, and I think it's I have certain outfits that make me feel so fucking powerful that in my head I look hot as shit. Like I could have sunglasses. This is what I do. I wear sunglasses, I put earphones in, and I just like walk along. If I'm walking somewhere, I walk with intention, and I walk like along to the beat of music in my head, and I just keep walking, and in my head I'm like, yeah, I feel fucking powerful. And the outfit that makes me feel really powerful is I love wearing flares, because they're just so like, I love the flare, that makes me feel amazing, and like big faux fur coats. Mm-hmm. And when I mean, my hair at the moment, it's like all grown out, but usually I have really choppy layers, and then I'll do it like Farrah Fawcett. That's my power outfit. Wearing amazing clothes that are like a statement outfit, that makes me feel so powerful.
So, a lot of our community members are bisexual. And we know that if you, sometimes there's like biphobia in the queer community. And I think that kind of a lot of people kind of struggle with this. And I was wondering if, you could kind of speak to, if you're comfortable, kind of how you handle this when you come up against that kind of stuff.
So I haven't experienced any biphobia in real life with friends, because all my friends are fantastic and they're all queer, and most of them are bisexual themselves. So we're just like all bisexual. But definitely online, I feel like there's this even if it's not being directed at you, it's always an internal feeling that you don't belong in your community, or either community, the queer community or the straight community, which is just like the rest of the world. I feel like the straights that I cannot relate to, even the way some of my straight, do I have any straight friends? I don't think I have any straight friends. Even though straight people interact with men, I see my old self in that, and it's this performing the gender roles, and it makes me so uncomfortable because that's who I used to be. Mm-hmm. So I have empathy for my friends with this kind of stuff. I just want to shake my friends and be like, this is what I do with my platform, right? I'm like, you deserve so much better than this shit that men are giving you. And I think it was when I started to date women, when I came out, women and non-binary people, and I was going on dates with them, I was shook at how low the bar was for men. Because seriously, because all of a sudden little things like asking for consent to like even touch me, or not even like in a sexual way, or like, do you mind if I do this, or can I kiss you, or this kind of consent culture that is more prevalent in queer communities. I was shook that this was so amazing to me when it's just basic human respect. Mm-hmm. So I think in both communities, it feels, as a bisexual person, it's very strange, because you can't really relate to either. Mm-hmm. Because you don't feel like you're queer enough to be in the queer community. Although I've really honestly got over that now. I feel like I'm so proud to be bisexual. I love being bisexual. I love the confusion that comes with being bisexual. It's a daily thing. It's like, am I gay? Am I bi? Am I gay? Am I bi? And then I'll see some hot guy on the street and I'm like, yes, you're bisexual. And it's some days I'm like, oh my God, no, I just hate man, I'm gay. And then I'll see a hot guy and it's like, no, we've been through this. And any bisexual person will probably relate to what I'm saying. Or maybe it's the other way. Maybe they feel like they're more straight, and they've been in heterosexual relationships and they don't feel that they're queer enough because they've never exercised their bisexuality, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's, I hate to be too like, ooh, labels or whatever. But honestly, like, if you feel a certain way and you feel that feeling is so strong in you that You could be with a woman, you could be with a queer person, or you could be with a queer person romantically, but not sexually, or the other way around. Whatever, who cares? Just like honor your desires. That's all I want to tell women, is just to just honor the fuck out of your desires. And if you're feeling like you are having these queer feelings, you don't need to jump to rush to call yourself queer or call yourself bisexual. Just honor those feelings, sit in them, hop onto a dating app, turn on women and have a little go, and be honest with people about how you're feeling. Don't communicate with people, hey, I'm just starting to date women, just wanted to be transparent about that. And then you let the person know. And I think there's this feeling that we're afraid of messing up and being bad at something new, but that's beautiful, because it means you have a huge arena for growth. That's how I view these things. Instead of being, or at least I do now, I used to be so afraid of rejection and afraid of trying new things. There's still a part in me that is afraid of trying new things, of course, today, but I try to, just like internalized misogyny, I flip it on its head and I say, wow, I'm not good at something. That's amazing. Have the humility to realize that you might be shit at this thing, but you're going to try it, and it's a new arena for growth. And if it doesn't feel good for you and it doesn't feel great, you tried it and you honored that initial desire to try something new. That's beautiful.
Yeah. So you write, to say I'm healed isn't the goal. The goal is to get out of the place in your head where you are an obstacle to your own progress. I think so many women are like, I need to be healed right fucking now. Like, what, I'm a mess if I'm not totally like perfectly like centered, empowered, all of that stuff. Can you kind of explain to me like the difference in those two ways of thinking?
You've got to view yourself as a work in progress. You're just constantly evolving, constantly shedding your skins. I literally imagine myself like floss is inside this like layers, almost like a rose, right? And there's loads of layers around her, and she's in there and she's screaming. This authentic floss is like inside. And every day I've got these layers around me that were who I was told to be, coping mechanisms to deal with trauma, patriarchy, my inner racism, my inner homophobia, all of this shit. You've got to peel them back. You've got to inspect these layers. Are these beliefs mine? Or is this a layer that is stopping me from becoming human? Because at the moment we're born, our humanity's bashed the hell out of us to exist in these capitalist squares, right? Like we're told from day one, be yourself. But then everything that we learn goes against that belief afterwards. And it's even going to school, you're going to develop some kind of, it's all this stuff. And I think, so the quote from my book, to say you're healed isn't the goal. You cannot be healed. There's always going to be shit to work on. And if you view it in that way, you realize that you're just this beautiful masterpiece and it's just never going to be finished. And you're always going to be making mistakes. Like, and I also think it's this feeling of putting people into, and this can be a trauma response, to view things in black and white. I know I do this a lot. You view people as good and bad. And it's a control thing to be able to say good person, bad person, avoid, and let's continue with this person. And there are gray areas. I've absolutely exhibited toxic behaviors. No one is on this, I said it on my Instagram the other day, if you've got someone on this non-toxic pedestal, knock them the fuck off, because everyone is toxic in some way. Even when I was in an abusive relationship, I exhibited toxic behaviors to cope with this dynamic, right? Even in friendships, my friends call me out on stuff and I call them out on stuff too. And I think it's this feeling that mistakes, you are not your actions. You are a product of your environment, but you must be held accountable for those actions once they're brought to your attention. And that healing process, you're never going to be done. Healing is not linear. I think it was Barack Obama's quote was, progress isn't linear. But it's the same with healing, right?
Yeah.
It's not like this. It's like this. And you come back and you repeat patterns, and then you learn and you repeat them again. And I've done it so much with dating. I repeated so many patterns from my abusive relationships and friendships, where I was attracted to people who weren't good for me because it's what I'm familiar with. It's a huge journey. Don't compare your journey to anyone else's, because you've got to stop viewing it as like this competition where there's one line and someone's ahead of you. Get in your own lane and you'll see that this is your higher self up here, and you're just trying to reach that person.
My other question for you, amongst many, would be, So there are a lot of white feminists who don't really understand the importance of intersectionality. So I guess I would really love to hear from you what you would say to those women who haven't really understood yet why it's so important to consider things like race
Yeah.
and all of that.
Well, we are the men to Black women. View it like that.
Yeah.
White women are the men to Black women. Like, there's no other way to view it. We are the oppressed. We are oppressed. Rachel Cargill, she worded it perfectly. She's an anti-racist educator on Instagram. Everyone should follow her and read all of her stuff. She said that it's hard for white women to acknowledge that we are both oppressed by the patriarchy, but also oppressors to Black people and Black communities.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard when, especially if you're a feminist who has unchecked privilege their whole life, we find it hard when our identity is so tied up in our oppression, which is valid. Fucking hell, it's so hard to be a woman in this world. It's shit, right? That is valid, but also look at the shit that you are enabling. Mm-hmm. Look at the fact that you are literally at the top of, especially if you're thin, like me, if you're thin and you're cisgender and you're able-bodied and you're white and you're traditionally feminine in your gender expression, all this kind of stuff, you have so much privilege within your oppression that is at the expense of Black people, Black women, and Black communities. So I think there's no other way to say it than like how you feel men treat you in terms of microaggressions and belittling you is how we treat, or generally speaking, is how we treat people of color, even if it's good intentions. All of that stuff, all the nice guys that we know that will say something sexist, and we love that. We love our guy friends, right? They're great, but they say shit that's so annoying, and it makes us feel othered, right, around them. It makes us feel like small and all this kind of stuff. That's how Black women may feel around you. Mm-hmm. And acknowledging that all these multiple realities can exist at the same time. And I think it's just so important. You can't, white feminism, so a feminism that centers around the white woman experience, which most of the time it has done, right? I mean, Black women didn't even get the right to vote when we got the right to vote, because white women didn't want Black women to get the vote. So there's always been a history of white women dehumanizing Black women for centuries. That is the intersection, right? Which is a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw. She invented intersectional feminism. We wouldn't have it without this Black woman. So I think you should be practicing intersectionality in your everyday life.
Well, I've taken up so much of your time. I really appreciate it.
So much.
Yeah, me too. This is fabulous. Hey, thank you again. It's been really, really enjoyable.
Cheers.
Okay, bye.